Hey guys, it's Tyken here. I'm back with another video for you, so let's dive right in. Oh, and don't forget to hit the like button and leave a comment. Let me know which manhwa you want to see next. Let's go!
From a devastated Earth, a final, desperate signal was sent into the void of space. A plea for help, a desperate cry for someone, anywhere to answer the call. And someone answered. Hovering over the ruins of a city, a solitary figure surveyed the destruction, having finally reached their destination. He wasn't there by chance. His gaze carried the weight of a mission, a promise he was finally there to fulfill. Without hesitation, the man leaped, plunging directly into the heart of the chaos consuming the world below. Meanwhile, on the surface, a young survivor ran for his life. Every step was an effort, every breath hurt, but stopping wasn't an option. Amidst the despair, he pleaded for help, for anyone who could save him from that nightmare. But his plea wasn't just for survival. It was a cry for vengeance against the monsters who had turned the world into hell and taken everything from him. As if answering his call, one of those creatures appeared in his path, blocking any chance of escape. And when the situation seemed like it couldn't get any worse, another monster appeared. The young man was completely surrounded. With nowhere to run, he stumbled and fell. The hope that kept him moving finally ran out. In his final moments, all the young man felt was the crushing weight of his failure and the pain of all his losses. He clutched the only thing he had left, a broken photo of his family, a memory of a world that no longer existed. The creatures drew closer, ready to deliver the final blow. For the young man, it was all over. But suddenly, a calm voice cut through the silence, apologizing for the delay. The young man looked up and saw a figure standing before him. The help he had so desperately sought had finally arrived, just in time. Before the young survivor, an imposing figure emerged, enveloped in an aura of power. The help he had pleaded for wasn't just real, it was overwhelming. The rescuer's gaze was focused and determined. He wasn't there to negotiate or hesitate. He had a clear mission to accomplish. The young man's tears were of pure relief. After so much suffering and solitude, he finally found someone who could change humanity's fate. With renewed hope, the young man asked if, at last, they could reclaim everything they had lost to the monsters. In a gesture of complete gratitude and despair, the young man clung to his savior, releasing all the weight and pain he had carried alone for so long. The rescuer then said he could now rest in peace, a promise of relief that carried a terribly literal meaning. Still amidst tears, the young man thanked him, unaware of the coldness behind those words or what was about to happen. And then, the last survivor's body gave out. The hope that arrived at the last second transformed into a silent, brutal betrayal. The rescuer closed his eyes for a moment. There was no satisfaction on his face, only the weight of a grim task that needed to be carried out. Suddenly, another person appeared. The rescuer called him by name, Kagura. He wasn't acting alone. Kagura observed the scene with a calculating gaze. He seemed to be the mastermind of the operation, analyzing the outcome of his terrible solution. The exchange of glances between the two confirmed the harsh reality. There was no one left to save. This was the end of the line. The truth was that humanity was already finished. With the death of that young man, the planet became a silent tomb. The cause of it all were monsters born from pollution, creatures with such incredible regenerative abilities that not even the strongest weapons could stop them. They were the Corruptors. And now, with no one left to fight, the world belonged entirely to them. Human weapons were useless against the Corruptors. Every confrontation was a massacre, a display of force that crushed any hope of victory for humanity. The monster's regenerative ability was so absurd that attacks simply had no effect, making any attempt at combat completely futile. The solution to this problem, however, came from a dark place. Kagura was involved in human experiments, crossing ethical lines in search of an answer to the crisis. For him, there was no other choice. The ends justified the means, even if it meant sacrificing the very humanity he was, in some way, trying to save. And the final result of this plan was the scene the rescuer witnessed: the death of the last human, a necessary sacrifice in Kagura's twisted view. The rescuer, the instrument of this execution, now carried the weight of that decision. He was the hand that extinguished humanity's last flame. The two partners faced each other from a distance. One was the scientist who created the plan, the other, the soldier who executed it. The mission was complete. But for the rescuer, this wasn't an end, but a beginning. He believed his actions, however terrible, would save the planet's future. Kagura's plan was more complex than it seemed. He developed nanomachines that not only destroyed the Corruptors' regeneration, but also restored the environment. This technology was the key to everything. By attacking the monster's core, the nanomachines initiated a purification process. They reversed the damage the Corruptors caused to the planet, slowly cleansing the land and atmosphere. The rescuer explained the long-term vision. With the planet restored, perhaps one day, a new civilization as prosperous as humanity could emerge again. He believed their sacrifice would give rise to a better future, even if no one of their kind was there to witness it. Kagura, however, was more skeptical. He admitted it all sounded like a distant dream, a fantasy, but it was the only possibility left to them. Believing in that maybe, the rescuer prepared for what was next. His strength would still be needed in the future, and he had to ensure this small chance of a new beginning stayed alive. With the decision made, the rescuer prepared for the next step. He and Kagura knew the planet's future now depended on a long, solitary plan. They entered an underground facility, a place designed to withstand the passage of time and house the world's last hope. Inside, the rescuer entered a cryogenics chamber. It was the only way for him to be present when the world needed him again, no matter how long it took. Kagura watched the process with a serious expression. The responsibility of ensuring the plan worked was now entirely in his hands. He reaffirmed his silent commitment. All he had to do was keep that small possibility of a new beginning alive, no matter the cost. Meanwhile, on the surface, time passed. The world remained a hostile place, dominated by the Corruptors who had annihilated humanity. Generations of monsters were born and died, unaware of the hope sleeping deeply beneath their feet, awaiting the right moment. The ruins of human cities were merely monuments of a forgotten era, and the last vestiges of the ancient civilization turned to dust. Years turned into centuries, and centuries, millennia. The planet remained a battlefield for the creatures. Seen from space, the planet still suffered. The scars left by the war and the Corruptors were deep and would take ages to heal. The very nature of the Corruptors was conflict. They fought among themselves for supremacy in an endless cycle of destruction. But slowly, almost imperceptibly, the world began to change. Nature, resilient, started to reclaim what was hers. As countless eras passed, the atmosphere cleared and plant life flourished. The Corruptors, without the toxic environment that sustained them, began to disappear. 1 billion years passed. Life prospered again in a peaceful and untouched world. The sacrifice had been worth it. The stage was set. 1 billion years passed. Peace reigned for countless ages on the reborn Earth. But tranquility, as always, was not destined to last forever. Somewhere, in a distant future, the race for survival had begun anew. A young woman ran desperately, her breath failing and fear etched on her face. She and her companions fled from a shadow creature, a beast that mercilessly hunted them through the dark corridors of an ancient ruin. Panic seized the group. They were searching for a guardian god, their only hope, but time was running out. The girl tried to protect the youngest of the group, but the boy was already in tears, sensing that the end was near. But amidst the despair, a spark of determination emerged. She wasn't going to give up so easily. She had a plan. Ahead of them, a massive door was revealed. It was their only chance to escape, or perhaps the place where they would find their salvation. With the artifact she carried, the girl managed to open the passage. For a second, hope shone again, but it wasn't an exit. It was a trap, a dead end. Relief turned into pure horror. They were cornered. The creature caught up to them, blocking their only escape route. Her companions panicked, unsure what to do. Too late. The beast attacked, and the ground shook with the impact. Despair was absolute. With nowhere to run and all lost, the young woman closed her eyes and cried for help, a desperate prayer to any god listening. And then, her prayer was heard. A deafening sound of breaking glass echoed through the ruin. Something, or someone, was answering her desperate call. The containment capsule couldn't withstand the pressure and shattered into 1,000 pieces. A beam of pure energy shot through the corridor, passing right through the middle of the group, who stood paralyzed, not understanding what was happening. And from that dazzling light, a human silhouette began to form. The guardian god they had sought so desperately had finally awakened. The group of survivors could barely believe what they saw. The creature's attack was interrupted, and now, a new presence completely dominated the environment. The figure took its first step in 1 billion years, treading on the shards of its own glass prison. Before them, a silver-haired man appeared, his gaze overflowing with power. He didn't seem like a god, but rather something far beyond that. The first thing he did was look for a message. Inside a briefcase, he found a data cube that Kagura had left behind. He needed to understand what had happened to the world, but all systems were offline, and that cube was the only clue. He wanted to know how the world was now, but with everything in ruins, the only source of information was the message Kagura left. Next to the cube, there was also an injection with an unknown liquid, a welcome kit for the new world. Without wasting time, he activated the message cube, ready to hear what his old companion had to say. It was only then that the group noticed an important detail. Their savior was completely naked. One of the companions, more sensible, covered the young woman's eyes. The situation was, at the very least, embarrassing. The girl didn't understand anything, while the other two didn't know where to look. But the man didn't care about any of that. After 1 billion years dormant, he felt his power flowing again. The sensation of being alive was exactly as he remembered it. After 1 billion years dormant, he felt at home again. The power flowing, the gloves fitting. It was exactly as he remembered. This was his true self. The immense stone door, which had once been a trap for the group, now opened before him without any effort. Jin stepped out into the daylight, and the young people he rescued followed him, still amazed and shielding their eyes from the sudden brightness. However, as he stepped outside, his expression changed. What he saw was not the world he had left behind. Before his eyes, a completely new and wild landscape stretched out. That was the world, 100 million years in the future. He observed the creatures accompanying him. They looked human, but Jin knew humanity should have been extinct long ago. The girl, relieved to be safe, pointed to her friends who were already running and playing ahead, trying to break the ice with the stranger. But Jin wasn't relaxed. He analyzed them, noting that despite their appearance, they spoke the same language as his time. For him, this was the final proof. They weren't human, but rather a new species that evolved similarly, likely influenced by past nanomachines. Meanwhile, the other two young people, one with cat features and the other with koala features, seemed confused about their own identity, questioning what exactly they were. The girl turned to Jin, not understanding anything about that conversation about evolution and nanomachines. Confusion was etched on her face. Sensing the mood, he decided it was time for introductions. He introduced himself as Shido Jin, asking them to call him just Jin. The girl, who introduced herself as Hakama, listened carefully, still holding on to her savior's arm. The smiling boy introduced himself as Danpo. After the formalities, they finally asked what Jin wanted in return for his help. Jin's answer was direct and to the point. He grabbed Hakama's wrist and said that, in return, he wanted them to help him defeat the Corruptor. Hakama was surprised by Jin's proposal. She expected anything as payment except a request for them to help him fight the creature that almost killed them. Danpo, on the other hand, panicked completely. The mere idea of going back to face that monster was too terrifying for him, and then they saw the reason for such despair. In the distance, their village was completely in flames, being destroyed by the Corruptor's attack. Without a second thought, Danpo bolted towards the village, overcome by fear. Hakama tried to stop him, but it was already too late. Jin merely observed the scene, remaining calm. He needed to analyze the situation before taking any rash action. The scene was one of pure destruction. The flames consumed everything, and it seemed nothing was left of that place. The two young people ran through the burning streets, ignoring the danger, focused only on finding possible survivors. Jin followed closely behind them, but with calculated steps. He wouldn't rush headfirst into danger without a plan. Suddenly, Jin was already beside Hakama, who was startled by his speed. He had covered the distance in the blink of an eye. Further ahead, they found one of the village elders bravely fighting a Corruptor. He used his staff to contain the creature, but his strength was at its limit. The effort was visible on his face. He wouldn't be able to hold the monster much longer. Jin analyzed the situation in a fraction of a second. It was time to intervene. The creature applied more force, and the elder's resistance finally gave way. It seemed to be the end of the line for him. But then, a powerful energy emanated from Hakama. She declared she would save the elder, surprising even Jin, who hadn't expected that. But Jin was faster. Before the girl could finish concentrating her power, he had already charged at the monster. With a single blow, Jin intercepted the Corruptor's attack, saving the elder at the last moment. Without wasting time, he scooped the elder into his arms to get her out of the danger zone. She could barely believe what had just happened, but another monster was already targeting Hakama. Jin, still protecting the elder, urged the girl to use the power she had begun to gather moments earlier. Still startled by the situation, Hakama focused all her energy. She knew she needed to act, and fast. Her attack collided directly with the Corruptor's fire breath, a power struggle that would decide everyone's fate there, and her power was stronger. The impact hit the creature head-on, proving to be devastating. A cry of pain echoed through the area. The creature fell, defeated. With the immediate threat neutralized, the other young villagers rushed to reunite with the elder. Jin watched everything carefully. He wondered if the girl's power came from the nanomachine particles floating in the air, a technology he knew well. The elder, however, was more interested in Jin. She questioned if everyone in that era was capable of such feats. She explained that only some of them possessed what they called sacred power. Jin realized this was how they referred to the ability to control nanomachines. At that, Hakama ran to her grandmother, relieved to find her well, but worried about the rest of the villagers. The elder reassured her granddaughter, saying she had evacuated everyone. Meanwhile, Danpo was still shaken by the destruction he had witnessed. But the elder's expression quickly turned serious again. She warned that Corruptor was just a hatchling. The real danger, the main body, was something they couldn't possibly face. And soon, hordes of smaller Corruptors would begin to infest the village. The real battle was just beginning. The creature Jin had defeated was, in fact, just a hatchling, a harbinger of what was to come. The true monster, the main body, was a creature of nightmares, a being far beyond their capacity to fight at that moment. To make matters worse, the elder predicted that, sooner or later, hordes of these larvae would emerge to infest what remained of the village. The conversation was interrupted when the elder turned to Hakama, asking why she wasn't found in the shelter with the other survivors. Meanwhile, one of the young village warriors seemed not to take the threat seriously, underestimating the Corruptors' power. The elder's concern seemed not to affect him, and he appeared entirely confident in his own abilities. Other villagers began to join the conversation, trying to understand what was happening and where the children had gone. Hakama's answer left her grandmother in shock. She couldn't believe her granddaughter and the other children had gone to the sealed gate, a forbidden place. The little girl then explained the reason to Jin. She said her own grandmother had told them long ago that the village's guardian god was asleep behind that door. The elder turned pale. She realized an old legend she told the children had been taken too seriously, and now the consequences could be disastrous. Jin, on the other hand, didn't understand anything about that guardian god story. He just observed the situation, trying to connect the pieces. The blue-haired young man, however, found the whole situation ridiculous. He looked at Jin with disdain, doubting that outsider could be some kind of god. The young man's arrogance was so great that Jin could barely contain his irritation, finding his presumption almost comical. But one of the children interrupted, defending Jin. The little one stated with conviction that the guardian god had even defeated one of the Corruptors, leaving the warrior speechless. Regaining his composure, the warrior approached Jin. He scoffed at the feat, saying it was just a larva and that he could have done the same. To him, outsiders were not welcome. Sales tried to lighten the mood with the others, acting as if the previous discussion didn't matter. He seemed confident, but Jin, in the background, didn't share the same optimism. He boasted to the younger ones, trying to convey a confidence that didn't convince everyone, especially the little girl who stared at him with doubt. Jin felt something was wrong. The threat was much greater than the warrior made it seem, and his arrogance could cost everyone dearly. Suddenly, the tone changed. Sals turned to Jin and made it clear that his help wasn't needed, stating that this was a problem exclusive to the village. The two stared at each other in silence, a standoff between the village protector's pride and the calm of the outsider who knew the real danger they faced. When one of the villagers asked where he was going, Sals replied that it was obvious. He was going to hunt the giant Corruptor alone. He was determined to prove his worth and protect his people without anyone's outside help. At that, a village elder intervened, desperate. She and the others knew that sending Sals alone into that fight was the same as sending him to his death. Jin merely observed the scene, understanding the people's fear. He knew the young warrior's pride wouldn't be enough against the real threat. The elder then turned to Jin. She acknowledged that he had saved them before and, as a last resort, asked him to at least take the children to safety. She herself would go after Sals, ready to risk everything in a last, desperate attempt, which left her granddaughter completely terrified. But, to everyone's surprise, Jin refused the request. He held the elder's spear, stopping her from leaving, which left her shocked by his actions. The little girl, however, understood immediately. Her eyes shone with hope, realizing Jin had a different plan and wasn't going to abandon them. The truth is, Jin's pride was also at stake. He couldn't just let that kid who called him an inferior species go die alone after insulting him. And the reason for such concern soon appeared. A gigantic Corruptor emerged from the waters, the true threat Sals had decided to face alone. The Corruptor's true form finally emerged from the depths. The creature Sals was facing alone was a colossal monster, far beyond what they'd imagined. But Jin wasn't intimidated for a second. He prepared for battle, determined to resolve it himself and prove his worth. He unleashed his energy, declaring that a corruptor like that was no match. Jin was ready to display the power of a true knight. The young warrior positioned himself before the beast, which was already charging to attack. The confrontation was inevitable, and the battle began. Jin charged with incredible speed, colliding directly against the corruptor's fury. But the danger didn't just come from the giant monster. Out of nowhere, other strange creatures began to emerge from the water. There were dozens of them, detaching and being launched like projectiles toward Jin. The fight had just gotten much more complicated. Suddenly, a dark and imposing figure revealed itself, bringing even more corruptors with it. Jin was completely surrounded, but even outnumbered, the young man didn't retreat. With his electric spear, he carved a path through the swarm of creatures. After getting rid of the smaller ones, Jin turned his attention to the main target. The size difference was absurd, but it didn't faze him. Without hesitation, he propelled himself with all his might, aiming directly for the monster's head. It was an all-or-nothing attack. The blow connected squarely. The spear, charged with devastating energy, pierced the creature's carapace, and amidst the chaos, a smile of pure confidence appeared on his face. He was exactly where he wanted to be. The giant corruptor recoiled from the impact, feeling the attack's power. Jin landed, already preparing for his next move. The wound on the creature's face was deep, proof of Jin's overwhelming power, but the battle was far from over. Amidst the battle's chaos, the young man spotted his family in the distance. He shouted desperately, trying to guide his grandmother to safety. But danger was already upon him. A giant shadow appeared from behind, ready to crush him before he could react. Even caught by surprise and at a complete disadvantage, the young man prepared for the impact, determined to fight to the end. But the blow never came. Out of nowhere, a mysterious figure appeared, raising an energy barrier that blocked the creature's attack. The young man was in shock, unable to process who that man was or where he had come from. With impressive ease, the rescuer took down the monster that had almost killed the young man. The power difference between them was absurd. The creature was on the ground, but the man in the overcoat wasn't finished with his work yet. With a simple gesture, he focused his power, preparing the blow that would put an end to that threat. And then, he unleashed an energy blast that sent the corruptor flying, clearing the path. Seizing the opening, the young man leaped onto the monster mid-air, thrusting his spear to ensure it wouldn't rise again. Soon after, he saw his people fleeing and shouted for them to hurry, trying to get everyone to safety. The villagers, including the elders, looked at the scene with a mix of fear and astonishment, not understanding what was happening. The young man's grandmother seemed the most terrified, seeing up close the size of the creatures that had destroyed their home, and her fear was justified. Another corruptor, even larger, rose before them. But this time, the young man wasn't alone to face it anymore. The rescuer, however, seemed to notice something strange. He raised his hand, confused by the situation, while the young man behind him also didn't understand what was coming. Without warning, the rescuer grabbed the young man from behind, propelling both of them forward in a sudden movement that caught the young man by surprise. He used the young man's body as a projectile, throwing him toward the monster with unbelievable strength and precision. Caught in the middle of the maneuver, the young man had no time to think. He just focused on the target and prepared his strike, falling directly onto the creature. After the impact, the young man could barely stand, exhausted by the adrenaline. The rescuer, however, remained calm, as if nothing had happened. The combined attack worked. The creature was impaled by crystal spikes that erupted from the earth, leaving it severely wounded and immobilized. But the victory was short-lived. A strange energy began to emanate from the monster's wounds, and its flesh started regenerating at an alarming speed. The young man looked at the rescatador bewildered. He had put everything into that strike, but the creature was already recovering. The resgatador then explained that the boy's attack was good, but the wound was too superficial to stop that thing's regeneration. The boy was in shock. The power he considered sacred wasn't enough. He asked if the resgatador was some kind of guardian god. The man denied it, stating he never became a god. He then revealed that the so-called sacred power was, in fact, advanced technology called nanomachines. With a cold, determined gaze, the resgatador knew exactly what needed to be done to nullify the monster's healing. The young man offered to immobilize the creature, insisting he could handle it himself. But the resgatador simply said he was wrong. That was a problem only he could solve, and he advanced alone. The creature, now almost fully healed, let out a deafening roar, ready for round 2. Moving with superhuman speed, the resgatador dodged the beast's attacks, revealing that, like them, he too was a relic from a distant past, and it was his duty to end all of it. The resgatador prepared himself. As a relic from a distant past, he knew the responsibility of ending that creature was his alone. Without hesitation, he unleashed a devastating attack, channeling his power through the ground and directing it straight at the monster. The blow struck the creature squarely, catching it by surprise with the force of the impact. The young survivor couldn't believe his eyes. He didn't understand the resgatador's words, but the scale of that power was simply undeniable. But that was just the beginning. A new energy, far more intense, began to manifest around the resgatador. He prepared to use a completely different technique, one the young man had never seen before. All that power was concentrated in his hand, ready to be unleashed all at once. The young man's astonishment was evident. That power was of a completely different nature from anything he had ever witnessed in his life. The resgatador then began to explain the origin of those creatures. They were the final product of a species with a long and bloody history. A history marked by endless wars and conflicts, which led to the creation of terrible weapons. He revealed that the monsters were, in fact, biological weapons created by humanity itself. And he, the resgatador, was the last remnant of that ancient humanity, carrying the weight of all its tragedies. With all the accumulated power, he finally fired a beam of pure, destructive energy. The attack hit the monster squarely, which roared in pain, feeling damage its regeneration couldn't ignore. The inhabitants of the nearby village, watching from afar, were completely paralyzed. They had never seen a corruptor wounded so decisively. The villagers' shock quickly turned into pure admiration. To them, the resgatador wasn't just a warrior, but the embodiment of the hope they had lost. The power he unleashed was so immense it could be seen from space, a pillar of light that tore through the atmosphere and struck the planet with overwhelming force. The impact altered the landscape, tearing a hole in the clouds and leaving only silence behind. The monster had been completely vaporized. One of the village youths couldn't process the scene. Fear and disbelief overcame him as he witnessed a power that defied reality itself. But for the resgatador, that was just another day's work. He simply wiped his hands as if he'd just swept dust from his home. With a confident smile, he revealed that it wasn't magic, but a scientific weapon. A technology from a forgotten past that he now used to cleanse the world. With the threat eliminated, a momentary calm settled. The resgatador observed the horizon, perhaps reflecting on the battle that had just ended. But they weren't alone. Hidden in the forest, a mysterious figure observed every movement, secretly recording everything. Through an observation device, the spy witnessed the resgatador's insane power. What she saw was something even the capital's strongest knights couldn't replicate. Initial surprise gave way to an almost manic excitement. That display of power wasn't a threat, but a unique opportunity. She knew exactly what to do. She needed to return to the capital immediately and report this incredible discovery to the guildmaster. Later, in the forest, the Resgatador accessed an old message. It was a recording he seemed to have kept for a very, very long time. The message was from a scientist, a face from his distant past. The Resgatador's expression hardened, showing that hearing that voice brought no good memories. The scientist in the recording spoke about the future and the state of the world, recalling when things started to go wrong. The Resgatador listened in silence, bearing the weight of those words. The recording was a constant reminder of his long and solitary mission. In the recording, the scientist recalled the past, when the Corruptors were the greatest threat. He explained that for a time, the number of monsters even decreased, giving false hope. The rescuer listened in silence. He already knew this story by heart, but the weight of responsibility in his gaze remained the same as centuries ago. The scientist continued, explaining that while the rescuer was in cryogenic sleep, he watched the world change over 1,000 years. But something unexpected happened. The world wasn't healing as he predicted, and a new variable emerged, messing up all his calculations. From his orbital station, he monitored the planet, waiting for signs of recovery. But what he found was the opposite. A new form of corruption spreading across the surface, more concentrated and dangerous than before. The Corruptors didn't disappear. Instead, they evolved, adapting to the new environment and becoming an even more intelligent threat. These new creatures were different, with an almost human appearance and a power the scientist couldn't predict or measure. The discovery was a shock. The original plan had failed, and the world now faced an enemy he hadn't anticipated. Worse still, these new Corruptors weren't solitary beasts. They led hordes, representing a danger on a completely new scale. Because of this, the scientist changed his plans. He needed to ensure that the new life emerging on Earth had at least a chance to fight for survival. He then revealed that he had left behind a special power, a technological legacy that only the rescuer would be able to use. This power was contained in a device, a cube capable of generating objects by altering the shape of nanomachines. The key to activating this ability was a syringe containing an enhanced version of the nanomachines compatible only with the rescuer's body. The plan was clear. Inject the nanomachines directly into his system, a process that would transform him forever. The process was a success. The rescuer's body was now completely fused with the nanomachines, overflowing with a power he had never felt before. He watched his own hands, feeling the new technology flow through every fiber of his being. The power now responded directly to his thoughts, and with a simple mental command, the nanomachines molded themselves, materializing a weapon directly into his palm. The power of creation was literally in his hands. It was exactly as the scientist had said, a very useful ability. Now, he had an infinite arsenal at his disposal. The scientist's message continued, explaining that he had hidden these power-ups in research labs scattered across the world. The strategy was simple. By not concentrating everything in one place, he ensured that, even in the worst-case scenario, the Corruptors wouldn't be able to destroy everything at once. But there was a more personal reason behind it all. The scientist didn't just want the rescuer to save the world. He also wanted the rescuer to travel and see the new world that had risen from the ashes of the old. A world that, despite the threats, would be much better. A world where civilization not only survived but flourished again, with its own heroes and guardians. It was a future where people could run freely, not out of fear, but with the hope of those who have a place to call home. A young woman ran towards her city, a safe place her ancestors fought to build. Entire villages were rebuilt, proving that humanity had found a way to start anew. The knowledge of the past was not lost. Culture and history were being preserved for new generations. This was the scientist's hope, the true legacy he wanted to leave behind. The holographic message then concluded. With the end of the recording, the rescuer returned to reality. But he wasn't alone. A new transmission began, revealing the face of an older man. The new transmission revealed the face of a scientist who smiled warmly. He seemed to know the rescuer well and the mission that was to come. The rescuer listened to the message with full attention. His face remained impassive, but the information he received was crucial for the next steps. Everything came from a small holographic cube, a recording left behind with the sole purpose of guiding him on his journey. With the information in hand, he confirmed that he understood the message, but at that moment, two hurried figures appeared, running towards him. The duo stopped abruptly upon finding him. From their reaction, it was clear they had been looking for him everywhere. Without ceremony, the two grabbed him, insisting he accompany them. Apparently, something important couldn't begin without his presence. The rescuer showed no reaction, merely observing the urgency of the two small beings, letting himself be led. His gaze was then drawn to the girl's necklace. The glowing key was the access key that had allowed his entry into that place. He allowed himself to be guided by the girl, who still seemed a little intimidated by his imposing presence. She explained that it was an amulet, passed down through generations, a relic that, according to legend, would summon a guardian god to protect the village in times of danger. He understood the situation. The technology that brought him there was seen by these people as a miracle, and he was the guardian god of the prophecy. As he was led away, the rescuer reflected that, in the end, he was completely dependent on the instructions he had received. Their destination was a grand celebration in the village center. Everyone was gathered around a huge bonfire in a festive mood. Upon their arrival, the other villagers called them closer to the fire, urging them to join the celebration. The arrival of the guardian god did not go unnoticed. All eyes turned to the mysterious figure who had just arrived. The rescuer watched the celebration with a slight smile. He was the center of attention, a god to these people, even if he didn't fully understand the reason for such a party. Suddenly, the celebration was interrupted by a commotion. One of the village youths, in a burst of excitement, ended up knocking over some seated villagers. The noise caught the rescuer's attention, and he turned to understand what was happening in the middle of the crowd. The young man with animal ears quickly apologized to those who fell, asking if they were all right. It was an accident, but the tension in the air was visible. Soon after, two children approached him. One of them commented, laughing, how everyone's attitude had completely changed since that afternoon, now that they saw him as a hero. It was then that the rescuer felt more people approaching. He looked back, realizing the conversation was about to take a more serious turn. It was a strong man and an elderly woman who seemed to be the village matriarch. They approached with an expression of deep respect. The man spoke on behalf of everyone, saying they wanted to repay the help. The entire village was indebted to the rescuer for saving them from destruction. The rescuer heard the offer, but he had no interest in material rewards. His goal in that world was different. So, he made his request. Instead of treasures, he wanted information about the current situation of that world, something money couldn't buy. The request caught the man by surprise. He didn't expect the guardian god to be so lost about the land he had just protected. The matriarch, however, understood exactly what he needed. She knew the perfect place for him to go. She explained that all information converged to a single location, the royal capital, where people from all over the country gathered. That's where the villagers themselves traveled to sell their special products, like fabrics made from silkworm tree thread. The elder then looked directly at the rescuer. The journey to the capital was long and dangerous, and he clearly didn't know the way. A proposal was coming. The elder then revealed her true plan, She wanted to take the little girl who possessed a special power to be trained, and she already had the perfect bodyguard in mind for the journey. The destination was the academy in the capital, a place where people with unique abilities could develop their gifts. The proposal was straightforward. The rescuer, seen by them as a guardian god, would be the girl's protector on the dangerous path there. But then, out of nowhere, a young man from the tribe interjected, confidently offering himself as the guide. He seemed certain he was the obvious choice. The matriarch didn't like the idea at all, but the young man just burst out laughing, finding her disapproval the funniest thing in the world. She then reminded him of an inconvenient detail. He himself had failed the academy's exam. Her words hit him like a punch. The argument heated up in front of everyone. As the two bickered, the rescuer and the little girl simply watched the family drama unfold. The elder explained that the young man, named Sauls, had failed the written exam. Apparently, having power wasn't enough to get in. This information piqued the rescuer's curiosity. He began to ponder the rules of that world and the complexity of the situation. Meanwhile, far away, a holy knight received news that seemed impossible. The giant corruptor threatening Kodama village had been defeated. His subordinate confirmed the information, explaining she was on her way to the guild to report the feat. The news was so shocking she had to tell him beforehand. The knight was perplexed. He himself doubted that one of his order could defeat the creature, and now he discovered someone had already solved the problem. Suddenly, the ground trembled with the arrival of something immense. The subordinate, however, showed no fear at all. On the contrary, she smiled as if the creature's presence was completely normal. The knight, now even more intrigued by the mysterious hero, decided he needed to find him. But first, he and his partner had a monster to take down. And with the same ease it appeared, the monster was eliminated. The knight's partner didn't even seem to exert herself as he watched the creature dissolve before his eyes. That feat made him genuinely curious. The knight decided he needed to personally meet the one responsible for defeating the creature that not even his order could stop. Far from there, in a peaceful village nestled in the mountains, the morning began quietly, oblivious to the monsters and battles happening elsewhere in the kingdom. And it was there that the mysterious hero, the guardian god of those people, awoke to a new day. He observed the landscape, grateful for the peace he never imagined he'd have. After a lifetime of struggles, waking up to a view like that felt like a dream. His moment of tranquility was interrupted, however. A young man from the local tribe appeared, bringing his clothes for the day that was beginning. The young man seemed a bit awkward, perhaps from seeing his guardian god so casual. The young man tried to remind him about the clothes, but the protagonist seemed more interested in enjoying the morning breeze than getting dressed. Later, already ready to leave, the protagonist bid farewell to the villagers. He wouldn't be alone. A young woman from the tribe would accompany him as a guide. The village matriarch asked him to take good care of Hakama, the young guide. The responsibility of protecting her was now his. The girl's older brother, however, didn't seem too happy about her departure. He reminded her of her duties, trying to maintain a tough facade. The protagonist simply smiled. Calmly, he told the young man he'd be waiting for him in the capital, leaving an invitation and a promise hanging in the air. The promise completely broke the young man's composure. The chance to go to the capital and reunite with his hero was more than he could have imagined. The farewell turned into a celebration. While Hakama's brother burst with joy, the protagonist sealed his commitment with the village leader. Before leaving, the leader bid farewell to little Hakama, giving her one last piece of advice. Her journey as the guardian god's guide was about to beg. The journey finally began. After bidding farewell to the villagers, the rescuer and his new guide, Hakama, took their first steps toward the unknown, leaving behind the only home the girl had ever known. They walked together along the road with the young guide excitedly following beside her protector. The adventure she had longed for was becoming a reality with every step they took. The landscape opened before them, revealing a vast world full of life, very different from what the stories told. The journey would be long, but the beauty of the path encouraged them. As dusk fell, they stopped before a waterfall. The sight was so impressive that little Hakama couldn't contain herself. Marveling, she pointed to the horizon, excitedly asking about their destination. The capital seemed like a distant dream, but now it felt a little closer. When night fell, they set up a small camp to rest. The warmth of the campfire was the only point of light in the vastness of the forest. While they ate, Hakama took the opportunity to ask the questions she had been holding back. She was curious about the world and especially about the silent man accompanying her. The rescuer listened in silence until one of the girl's questions made him pause. Her curiosity touched upon a much heavier topic than she had imagined. With a serious expression, he decided to share a grim truth about the world they lived in. He explained that the threat of the Corruptors wouldn't simply disappear. They were a plague that would never fully die out. His mind took him back to the creatures he had faced, monsters that, according to the world's rules, should only be able to reproduce in extremely polluted environments. However, the fact that they had appeared in such a pure and preserved place was an alarming sign. For the rescuer, this confirmed his worst suspicions. A change was happening, something that was strengthening the Corruptors and could permanently unbalance the world. The intensity of his thoughts reflected on his face, and Hakama noticed it immediately. She commented that he had a scary expression, breaking his train of thought. Caught by surprise, he simply replied that he was lost in thought. The girl's presence anchored him in the present, a small relief amidst such great worries. Hakama noticed the shift in the conversation's mood. With innocent curiosity, she tried to break the ice and better understand the man who saved her. The rescuer asked her to stop calling him Guardian God. He introduced himself simply, preferring a name instead of a title. But the tranquility of the night was suddenly broken. The sound of horses approaching at high speed interrupted their conversation, putting both of them on high alert. From the darkness, a voice announced itself, asking for a moment of their attention. A group of knights emerged into the clearing, led by a man in imposing armor. The moment of peace had officially ended. The group's captain observed them from above with a gaze that mixed authority and clear suspicion. The rescuer stared back, unmoving. His eyes were cold and calculating, analyzing the threat that had just arrived. The captain introduced himself as the leader of the 7th Order of Knights, but one of his subordinates seemed impatient. The knight beside him already seemed certain that they were the ones they were looking for. Suddenly, the same knight exploded in anger. She yelled at the rescuer, demanding he stand in the presence of her captain. Her fury was completely uncontrolled. She turned to her leader, stating with full certainty that those two were the ones they were looking for. The captain told his subordinate, Karina, to be silent. With a smile that conveyed no trust, he apologized for the rudeness and asked to speak with the rescuer. The captain ignored the rescuer's question and asked his own. He wanted to know where that mysterious man had come from, further escalating the tension of the encounter. Little Hakama, however, seemed completely oblivious to the situation. Her only concern at the moment was the piece of bread she was holding, but Karina's patience had already run out. With a smile that promised trouble, the knight decided it was time to act on her own. She ran towards her horse, completely disregarding her superior's orders. Her impulsiveness was speaking louder. In a swift motion, she drew her sword, ready to attack. To Karina, the rescuer's calm was a carelessness, an opening she wouldn't waste. The rescuer, however, remained focused on his conversation with the captain. He seemed surprised to learn that such detailed birth records existed in that country. Karina's impulsive attitude clearly annoyed her captain. He ignored her, continuing his talk with the man in the overcoat as if she wasn't even there. Hakama, still bewildered, tried to explain the origin of her clothes. She mentioned the fabric was considered a luxury item in the capital, proof of her background. The captain's reaction left Karina in a panic. Being ignored like that, especially in front of a suspect, was a humiliation she hadn't expected. The knight leader's patience was wearing thin. He gripped his sword hilt tightly, a gesture that was a silent, clear threat. But the rescuer wasn't intimidated. He materialized his own blade out of thin air, shocking Hakama and showing the knights he was more than ready for a confrontation. With the blade in hand, he continued the conversation. Apparently, he was aware of the situation in the region. He explained he knew about the bandit attacks on the road, who used children as bait to ambush travelers, exactly as they were doing now. The captain was unfazed by the display of power. Pointing his sword, he insisted on the same question, demanding to know where the rescuer had come from. Hakama watched the scene, utterly terrified. The conversation was over, and what remained was the imminent combat she didn't know how it would end. As the tension mounted, Hakama felt panic take over. She was in the middle of a confrontation that seemed ready to explode at any moment. Determined not to stand still, the young woman focused her sacred power, preparing an attack to help the rescuer, even knowing her chances were slim. The captain of the knights immediately noticed her movement. Without hesitation, Hakama launched a volley of light projectiles towards the enemy, using all the strength she could muster. But the result was shocking. Her power simply dissipated into the air before hitting the target, leaving her utterly perplexed and vulnerable. The rescuer watched the scene without moving. Hakama's intervention, though well-intentioned, was useless and only confirmed the knight's suspicions. It was then that the captain revealed the reason: an artifact he held, capable of nullifying the sacred power Hakama had used. With the young woman's magic neutralized, the knight turned his attention to the rescuer, pointing his sword and demanding once again to know where he had come from. The rescuer's answer didn't come in words. He simply kept his blade raised, making it clear that the conversation was over. His patience had run out. Diplomacy failed, and now the only language left was that of force. The standoff was set. On one side, the Seventh Order of Knights, demanding answers. On the other, the rescuer, silent and prepared for what came next. The captain finally lost his temper and threatened to end everything right there, stating he would kill him if he didn't get an answer. The threat, however, caused no reaction in the rescuer. He remained completely impassive, staring at the knight without showing fear. His gaze was cold and analytical. He measured his opponent, sensing there was more to that knight than just armor and a sword. For the first time that night, the captain showed a hint of hesitation. The rescuer's unwavering calm was starting to break his confidence. Despite the blade pointed at him, the rescuer remained still. His unwavering calm was clearly making the knights more nervous than him. Karina, however, lost her patience. She exploded in fury, questioning why her captain was hesitating instead of acting. But the elf captain ignored her protest. He sheathed his sword and apologized for the aggressive approach, stating it was just part of the job. The young woman, who had been silent until then, approached and asked if the captain's peace offer was sincere, wanting to be sure it wasn't a trap. She seemed hopeful, yet still wary. The promise that they could meet in the capital and even receive help seemed too good to be true. The captain confirmed his offer with a reassuring look. He said that if they had problems, they could seek him out so he could make up for the misunderstanding. With the situation finally resolved, the knight turned to leave with his order, leaving the rescuer and the girl behind. He mounted his horse, but the decision to retreat didn't please Karina at all, who watched everything with pure indignation. Before leaving, the captain exchanged one last look with the rescuer, as if confirming that the truce between them was real. The knight then bid farewell, stating that since everyone was heading to the capital, it was likely they would meet again on the road. As soon as they moved away, Karina confronted her leader. She couldn't understand why he retreated so suddenly from a target she considered highly suspicious. From afar, the Resgatador watched the scene with a slight smile. He knew exactly why they retreated. It wasn't out of kindness, but pure survival instinct. As the group rode on, Karina's voice still echoed through the forest. She kept questioning her captain's decision, accusing him of being weak. She couldn't accept it. To the knight, the Resgatador was just an inferior species, and they should have captured him without a second thought. It was then that the captain finally revealed the reason for his hesitation. He confessed that, during the confrontation, he tried to attack the Resgatador 3 times, but his body simply refused to obey. The captain's confession left Karina utterly confused. He, on the other hand, seemed amused by the situation, knowing she had no idea what truly happened during the encounter. The other knight, an elf, noticed Karina's rising anger and decided to intervene. With a smile, she held her colleague's horse's reins, trying to calm things down before the situation escalated. She then revealed that she also felt something strange. The elf knight confessed she tried to use her spiritual powers, but they simply refused to obey, something that had never happened before. Meanwhile, back at the camp, the Resgatador remained calm. He was aware of every attempted attack, feeling their power dissipate before it could even be used against him. The captain continued his explanation with a serious expression. He admitted it wasn't just a momentary hesitation, but a total and absolute inability to act against that man. In his mind, the scene replayed. He, an elite captain, sword in hand and ready to attack, facing the target who seemed completely defenseless. But his body simply wouldn't respond. His hand trembled, locked by an invisible force that prevented him from completing even the simplest movement. It was like fighting his own survival instinct. What the captain didn't see was the Resgatador's subtle reaction. A simple, almost imperceptible gesture was enough to completely nullify the threat before it even formed. It was then that the captain understood the terrifying truth. The Resgatador reacted before he could even initiate the attack. The power difference between them was simply absurd. The elf knight agreed, explaining that it signified a gigantic power gap. Their strength was suppressed so easily that it was frightening to consider the opponent's level. Karina was in shock. She, who had been so confident and aggressive, admitted she noticed absolutely nothing. The revelation left her pale, realizing how close to death she'd been without knowing. The conversation then shifted to the incident in Kodama village. They began to wonder if that mysterious man could be the same one who defeated the Corruptor, terrorizing the region. The elf confirmed she also considered the same possibility. The strength they felt was consistent with someone capable of such a grand feat, which only deepened the mystery surrounding him. The captain ended the discussion. He decided that, for now, they would leave the man alone. The priority was to return to the capital, as the main mission, the Corruptor, had been resolved. But in his mind, the man's identity wouldn't leave him. The guardian god of Kodama village, he thought. That encounter definitely wouldn't be forgotten so easily. After the tense encounter, the knights finally departed. The elf knight and Karina rode together, still processing what had just happened. The atmosphere was heavy. Karina, in particular, couldn't hide her frustration. The way she was completely neutralized by that mysterious man still wounded her knightly pride. The captain maintained his composure, but the conversation about the man's identity continued. The doubt about who he was still lingered in the air. As the group rode through the night, they continued to debate if that man could be the same one who saved Kodama village. The idea seemed increasingly likely. Karina still seemed indignant about the whole situation, but the captain had already made his decision and wouldn't go back on it. He explained to the group that even with the corruptor problem resolved faster than expected, the priority now was to return to the capital. The captain also gave some advice, likely for Karina, saying that a person's character should be valued more than their brute strength. And so they continued their journey back to the kingdom's imposing capital, the center of their power and duty. The captain reflected on the encounter. That man, the guardian god, was an unknown piece on the board, and he felt that this was just the beginning. Meanwhile, elsewhere, the resgatador and the young boy continued on their way. The man revealed that his goal was to solve some of that country's biggest problems. The declaration caught the boy by surprise. He hadn't imagined the quiet man beside him harbored such a grand ambition. The young boy then began to talk about the knights they encountered, recalling the aura of power from the captain and the other holy knights. With admiration, he tried to explain that the level of power he felt from them was something completely different from anything he had ever seen. The boy described how he understood that power. The knights borrowed strength from spirits to use their techniques. That's how magic in that world worked for him. The resgatador listened intently. He began to realize that what that era called spirits and sacred power was, in fact, a technology he knew very well. As they walked, the young guide continued to explain about the world around them, while the resgatador followed, silently processing the new information. She explained that, over time, people changed to adapt to their environments. Some developed animalistic traits, becoming stronger and more suited for survival. But the conversation took a dark turn when she mentioned inferior species. The term caught the resgatador's attention, and he pondered its meaning. The young girl explained that not everyone adapted in the same way. There was a clear distinction in society between those who evolved and those who remained as they were before. She described the diverse races that emerged from humanity. Some looked like fish, others resembled insects, each shaped by the environment they lived in. A long time ago, each people could only live in limited areas, and their physical changes were a direct response to that need for survival. Evolution was the key to prosperity, transforming humanity into a tapestry of new species, each perfectly suited to its home. The revelation hit him hard. The history of that world was far more complex and ancient than he could have ever imagined. He wondered if those were the people humanity had transformed into, the true descendants of survivors from a past he knew. The young woman then spoke about the other side of the story. Those who didn't change, those who failed to adapt over the centuries. These were called inferior species. Compared to those who evolved, they were considered weak and therefore despised and even enslaved by the new society. The existence of slaves and such deep prejudice visibly disturbed him. To him, despite the differences, everyone still seemed fundamentally human. The young guide agreed, stating firmly that judging someone merely for being a little different was fundamentally wrong. Her conviction surprised him. In a world so full of divisions, the purity of her thoughts was something rare and unexpected. With a genuine smile, the rescuer praised her, saying she was a good girl. In that moment, he saw a hope he hadn't expected to find. As the rescuer and his guide continued their journey, their quiet conversation was suddenly interrupted by a figure appearing on the road. Both stopped, taken by surprise by the sudden appearance. The young woman seemed curious, while the rescuer remained on alert. Out of nowhere, a blue-haired boy stumbled awkwardly, as if his legs had given out from sheer exhaustion. He fell hard to the ground, right in front of them. The guide rushed over, worried about the boy's condition, but the rescuer stayed put. He simply observed the scene with a cold, analytical gaze, trying to understand what was truly happening there. The boy was clearly exhausted and injured, barely able to breathe after the fall. He seemed to have been running from something for a long time, but upon closer observation, the rescuer noticed an unusual detail. That boy wasn't who he seemed to be, and this encounter was no mere accident.